Chapter 4. Thursday morning dawned heavy with unease. Trying to ignore the feeling of a boulder lodged in her stomach, Claire stepped into the hospital. Her bag hung more heavily on her shoulder than usual. Inside it, carefully wrapped in a hand towel, lay a small bottle of clear liquid she'd retrieved from Michelle's gardening supplies. The plan had settled into place over the last couple of days. Mercer was known to be a caffeine addict. He even brought his own espresso machine into whatever office he was working from. Of course, no one else was allowed to touch it. But Claire didn't need his machine. Just one of his unattended cups. The air in the office seemed to vibrate with dismay. Everyone knew the new consultant took up his post today. Claire rearranged her desk with methodical care, all the time watching everything. This included the position of the security cameras that dotted the corridors and offices. She, along with everyone else who'd worked here a long time, knew all the blind spots. The trick was to check a new camera hadn't been put up since last time she'd been in. When the department doors swung open, Claire's fingers stilled on her keyboard as Adrian Mercer sauntered in. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a carefully trimmed beard, he was a good-looking man. What a shame that he had such an awful reputation. It showed, as well, in the same arrogant bearing she'd seen in others who believed themselves invincible. "Good morning, everyone," he said. "I'm Adrian Mercer, looking forward to working with you all." His gaze swept the office. Did it linger a moment too long on each woman, or was she imagining it because she expected the worst of him? Under the familiar mixture of disgust and fear, Claire felt a new, cold determination. As he approached her desk, she tensed in anticipation of the first inappropriate comment, the first unwanted touch. But he merely nodded and continued to his office. No lingering looks. No casual invasion of personal space. Throughout the morning, Claire watched him. He left soon after he'd arrived and came back carrying his coffee machine. He spent some time setting it up and making sure it worked exactly the way he wanted. He maintained a professional distance with everyone. When Angela brought him patient files, he thanked her without looking at her body. When the junior doctor gave her report, he listened attentively, eyes on her face. By lunchtime, Claire's neck ached from the tension of waiting for the mask to slip. She couldn't concentrate on her work, her attention constantly drawn to Mercer's office. Now that she'd decided to act rather than react, he wasn't giving her good reason. Was that strange feeling one of disappointment? Surely not. "He seems different," Angela whispered, pausing at Claire's desk. "Give him time," Claire replied. "Leopards don't change their spots." But as the day progressed, Mercer remained scrupulously professional. He addressed the staff by name, remembered details from their introductions, and kept his door open during all meetings with female colleagues. He also drank a lot of coffee. Claire was amazed he wasn't bouncing off the ceiling. When Claire had to take him a set of transcripts, she braced herself. "These are the Montgomery transcripts you requested," she said, placing them on his desk. "Thank you, Ms. Wisden." He glanced up, meeting her eyes briefly before returning to his computer. "I appreciate your thoroughness." Claire waited for what would come next. The suggestive comment, the unnecessary touch, the subtle power play. Nothing happened. Mercer simply continued working, the boundary between them intact. Confused, she returned to her desk. The bottle in her bag was getting heavier. She'd been so certain of what would happen, and what her response would be. By the end of the day, her certainty had crumbled. Mercer had been unfailingly appropriate with everyone. He'd even stayed late to help the ward clerk troubleshoot a patient records issue, maintaining a respectful distance the entire time. He'd been entirely unlike himself. Claire packed her things slowly, watching him through the glass wall of his office. He was speaking on the phone, his face serious, professional, no trace of the predator she knew him to be. On the bus home, vexation settled over her like a chilly cloak. She was shocked by its intensity, but immediately knew it was because she'd been denied her righteousness, her justification for revenge. The bottle remained unused in her bag, her plan unexecuted. At home, Claire stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her, even though she looked the same as she had that morning. "How was the new consultant?" Michelle called from the kitchen. Claire didn't answer immediately. She unpacked her bag, removing the small bottle and holding it up to the light. The liquid inside caught the glow from the ceiling fixture, innocent-looking and yet deadly. He was professional, she finally said, entering the kitchen. Respectful, appropriate. Perhaps he's learned from others' mistakes. Perhaps. Claire placed the bottle on the counter between them. I brought this for nothing. Michelle glanced at it. You seem disappointed. Are you disappointed? Claire stared at her friend. She couldn't say it aloud, but she was disappointed. She'd wanted Mercer to be exactly what she'd expected, another predator she could righteously eliminate. She'd wanted the justification for violence. Who am I becoming? She whispered. She held her hands in front of her face. These hands had not only gripped a bronze hair, but also wielded it. They had carried poison to work, with intent. I wanted him to behave like the monster I know he is, she admitted. I wanted the excuse to act. But he gave me no excuse. Today, he won't be able to help himself, though. He'll go back to his usual behavior soon, and when he does, I'll be ready. Claire recognized she had been the woman who once endured harassment rather than cause a scene. She also knew that woman was gone, and in her place stood someone willing to do more than cause a scene. Someone prepared to act. Michelle reached for the bottle. Shall I put this somewhere safe? No. Claire snatched it up and put it back in her bag. Thank you, but I'll take care of it. Michelle stared at her, but said nothing. Claire noticed a tiny movement of her lips, though, as if she suppressed a smile. Claire laid out her list on the kitchen table. The yellow legal pad showed carefully grouped categories: non-perishable foods, medical supplies, water storage, tools, communication, light heat. Some items had check marks beside them. Most did not. I think we need to take this more seriously, she said, turning the pad so Michelle could see it better. The internet problems keep happening. The blackouts are getting longer. When I couldn't access my bank account for 3 days last week, it felt like a warning. Michelle glanced at the list. You're overreacting. Systems glitch all the time. These aren't just glitches. Remember what Lucinda was saying before she disappeared? About the signs of infrastructure collapse? Michelle snorted. That conspiracy theorist? She probably ran off to join some doomsday cult in the countryside. But what if she was right? Claire tapped the notepad. Look at the patterns. Food prices up 30%, the water quality warnings, 3 power stations offline. The Ghost Day event damaged more than just our economy. So your solution is hoarding canned beans and bottled water? Michelle shook her head. Claire, the world's been ending since it began. People have been predicting collapse for centuries. This is different. You didn't see what happened at the supermarket last month when the payment systems went down. People were ready to riot over groceries. Michelle took the list and scanned it. And where exactly would we store all this? Our cupboards are already full with your panic buying from last time. We could convert part of the basement, clear out those old boxes. I'm not living in a bunker because you're having an existential crisis after. Michelle stopped herself. Claire met her eyes. After killing someone? The words hung between them. Michelle looked away first. I'm not having an existential crisis, Claire said. I'm being practical. If something happens, we need to be ready. Nothing's going to happen. The power comes back on. The internet reconnects. Life goes on. Claire took back her list and made a production of adding batteries to it. She also added crossbow. Lucinda knew things. She had information. I need to find out what happened to her. Why? So you can disappear too? So I can understand what she knew that we don't. Michelle's teaspoon clinked against the side of her cup. If this isn't about Cock-Wombledok, then it's about Mercer, isn't it? You're disappointed he's not giving you an excuse. Claire said nothing. The next morning, the hospital corridor was colder than usual. As Claire passed through the reception area, she saw a handwritten sign apologizing for the temporary heating issues. At her desk, she found a memo about conserving electricity and a notice that the elevators would operate on restricted schedules. She watched Mercer arrive. Today marked his 2nd week, and there had still been no hint of inappropriate behavior. He greeted everyone with the same professional courtesy, maintained appropriate distance, and kept conversations strictly work-related. Claire found herself staring at his door. The weight of the small bottle remained in her bag, untouched but present, like a promise unfulfilled. You need something? Angela appeared beside her desk, startling her. Just thinking. Claire minimized the search window where she'd been looking for information about Lucinda Thompson. Do you remember that secretary from orthopedics? The one who used to talk about preparing for societal breakdown? Angela frowned. Vaguely. Weird woman, always going on about stockpiling supplies. Did anyone ever say what happened to her? Why she left? Not really. Angela shrugged. People come and go around here. Why? Just curious. She seemed to know a lot about a lot of weird stuff, like systems failing. Like the heating today? Angela pulled her cardigan tighter. That's just budget cuts, not the apocalypse. Claire nodded. Did she ever mention where she lived? Outside work, I mean. I think she had a place near Redwater Reservoir, some cottage she was always fixing up. Why the sudden interest? No reason, Claire said, turning back to her computer, just wondering where people go when they disappear. After Angela left, Claire pulled up a map and searched for Redwater Reservoir. It was remote, surrounded by forest, with only a scattering of properties nearby. Perfect for someone who wanted to escape notice. Perfect for someone preparing for something. She glanced toward Mercer's office. He was reviewing patient files, his face a study in concentration. No lingering glances at passing staff. No casual touches. Nothing to justify what she carried in her bag. Claire opened the personnel directory and typed in Lucinda's name. Her record showed a resignation date, but no forwarding address. The contact number was disconnected when Claire tried it during her lunch break. Her search for Lucinda's social media accounts turned up nothing after a certain date, as if she'd simply walked away from her digital life. Like she'd walked away from her job. Claire understood the impulse now in a way she never could have before. If it had been voluntary, of course. Lucinda could simply have been one of the people who had disappeared for reasons unknown to the hoi polloi. When Mercer called her into his office that afternoon, Claire's pulse quickened. Here it comes, she thought. The first step over the line. Ms. Wisden, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I wanted to discuss the filing system. I'm having trouble locating the Henderson case notes. Claire sat, keenly aware of the distance between them. They should be in the digital archive. I can show you how to access it. I'd appreciate that. He rolled his chair back slightly, maintaining a respectful space between them as she leaned forward to access his computer. No accidental brushing of hands, no looming over her shoulder, no inappropriate comments about her appearance. Nothing but professional courtesy. Claire was getting cross with herself. What was wrong with her? To feel let down by someone behaving exactly as they should. Perfect, he said when she finished the demonstration. Thank you for your help. Is there anything else you need? The words hung in the air, almost an invitation. No, that's all. He smiled politely. Have a good evening, Ms. Wisden. After work, instead of taking her usual bus home, Claire headed to the library. The computers there were old but reliable, and she could search without leaving digital footprints tied to her hospital account. She spent an hour searching property records near Redwater Reservoir, cross-referencing with Lucinda's surname. Finally, she found it, a small cottage purchased 3 years ago, just before the Ghost Day event. Claire copied down the coordinates, tucking the note into her wallet. She'd need to borrow Michelle's car. The cottage was too remote for public transport. On the bus home, Claire stared out at the darkening streets. A power outage had affected several blocks, leaving shops and homes in darkness. People moved like shadows on the pavement, illuminated only by passing headlights and the occasional glow of a phone screen. This was how it started, Claire thought. Not with a bang, but with inconveniences, disruptions that grew more frequent, more extensive, until one day the systems simply didn't restart. Lucinda had seen it coming. She'd prepared and departed before things worsened. Maybe she had the information Claire needed about surviving what might come. Claire's feeling that something bad approached them all was growing all the time. At home, Michelle was watching the news. Another report about a cyber attack on a major employer, this time in the north. More people jobless, homeless, hopeless. I need to borrow your car this weekend, Claire said, hanging up her coat. What for? I found Lucinda's address. I want to see if she's still there. Michelle muted the television. You're serious about this prepping thing, aren't you? I'm serious about being prepared. Claire sank onto the sofa beside her friend. Something's happening. You can feel it too. I know you can. What I feel is you looking for something to focus on instead of dealing with what happened. Michelle turned to face her. How was Mercer today? Still disappointing you with his good behavior? He's consistent. I'll give him that. Maybe he's changed. People can, you know. Or maybe he's biding his time. They sat in silence, watching the muted images of flooded streets and emergency workers on the screen. Take the car, Michelle finally said. But be careful, and don't stay out there if the weather turns. Claire nodded. I need to understand what Lucinda knew, what she was preparing for. I feel like I'm fumbling in the dark. Maybe that's all any of us are doing, Michelle said, turning the sound back on. Fumbling in the dark, trying not to bump into each other too hard. Claire thought of the bottle in her bag, of Mercer's continued propriety, of the darkness spreading block by block outside. She thought of Lucinda, who had seen something coming and chosen to face it on her own terms. I need to be ready, Claire said, more to herself than to Michelle. Whatever comes next, I need to be ready. The old blue Mini struggled up the winding dirt track, wheels slipping on loose gravel. Claire gripped the steering wheel tighter as the car jolted over a deep rut. The forest pressed in on both sides, branches scraping against metal. For the third time in 10 minutes, she checked the handwritten directions propped on the dashboard. Looking for Lucinda had seemed straightforward in theory. The reality was more challenging. No GPS signal reached this far into the woods. The map she'd printed showed only the main forestry roads, not this narrow track that seemed to lead nowhere. As the car rounded another bend, Claire caught a glimpse of something through the trees, a patch of moss-darkened slate. She slowed, peering through the windshield. There, half hidden by overgrown rhododendrons, stood a small stone cottage. Smoke curled from its chimney, thin and grey against the darkening sky. Claire parked where the track widened slightly and switched off the engine. The sudden silence made her ears ring. She sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel, weighing her options. This far from the main road, no one would hear her if she got stuck and had to call for help. Why had that thought suddenly risen to her mind? As she stared, the cottage door opened. A man stepped out, burly, bearded, wearing muddy work boots and a quilted body warmer over a plaid flannel shirt. He stood, arms folded, watching the car, watching her. Even at this distance, Claire noted the aggressive stance, the way he positioned himself to block the doorway. She took a deep breath, collected her bag, and stepped out of the car. Hello, she called, trying to sound casual. I think I might be lost. The man didn't move. Private property, he said, voice carrying clearly across to her. Turn around and head back the way you came. I'm looking for Lucinda Thompson, Claire said. An old work colleague of mine. The man shifted his weight. He scratched his neck. No one by that name here. Before Claire could respond, a woman appeared in the doorway behind him. Her hair was tied back in a severe braid. She was thinner, but it was unmistakably Lucinda. She placed a hand on the man's arm, murmuring something Claire couldn't hear. As Lucinda stepped across the threshold, Claire noticed the bruising. A dark purple shadow spread across her left cheekbone, and a raw, partially healed gash ran from her temple to her jaw. It's all right, David, Lucinda said. She's from the hospital. The man, David, turned to look at her, then back at Claire. 10 minutes, he said. Then she goes. He retreated into the cottage, leaving the door open. Lucinda remained where she was, hands clasped in front of her. She didn't invite Claire closer. What are you doing here? Lucinda asked, voice flat. Claire slowly crossed over towards her. I wanted to talk to you about what's happening, in the world, in our country. You seem to know. Nothing's happening that I didn't predict, Lucinda replied. Her gaze darted to the cottage door, then back to Claire. You should go. It's not safe here. For whom? Claire asked, stopping at the bottom of the steps. Lucinda flinched at the question. She shook her head warningly, finger to her lips. She stared at Claire, who didn't move. Then Lucinda shrugged and raised her voice. Come in for tea before you go. It's a long drive back. The cottage interior was dim, but warm. Looking around, Claire spotted a wood stove. It seemed very efficient. David sat at a rough wooden table, a glass of beer in front of him. He looked up when they entered. Sit, he instructed Claire, pointing to a chair opposite. Lucinda moved to the kitchen area, filling a kettle with water from a large container. Claire noted the propane stove, the solar panels visible through the window, the stockpiled supplies lining the shelves. It seemed that Lucinda had indeed prepared for collapse. "David found me here after I left the hospital," Lucinda said quietly, her back to the room. "He knows how to live off-grid." Claire watched David's hand as he drummed his fingers on the table. A heavy ring caught the light, its edges raw and sharp. The mark on Lucinda's face suddenly had context. "How fortunate," Claire said carefully, "that you found someone who shares your concerns." Although she somehow doubted Lucinda had found him, it looked more as if he'd found her. And if he'd found her out here, miles from anywhere, there would have been nothing she could do about it. David's eyes narrowed. "What exactly did you come here for?" "I was curious about Lucinda's sudden departure. We all were. We were all worried when she just didn't come into work one day and hasn't been seen or heard of since." Lucinda placed a mug of tea in front of Claire. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes darted around, as if she was trying not to look at anything or anyone. "The signs were there," she said, "but no one wanted to see them." "I see them now," Claire said, meeting her gaze. "It's only the beginning," Lucinda murmured, the spark of her old conviction flickering for a moment. David snorted. "Another convert, Lucy? Too late for that. We're all sorted here. We don't need anyone else coming in, using up our supplies." Claire sipped her tea, studying Lucinda over the rim of her mug. The woman who had once spoken with conviction in breaks at the hospital now stood silent, flinching at David's every movement, his every word. "How did you get that cut?" Claire asked. "It looks as if it needs to be dressed properly. You don't want it to get infected." Lucinda's hand flew to her face. "I fell. In the garden." David reached for her wrist, tugged her closer. "Clumsy as ever," he said. He stroked her hand as if she were his pet. Claire's stomach churned. She put her mug down. "I should go," she said, "before it gets dark." David stood. "I need to take a piss. Lucy, see your friend out." As soon as the bathroom door closed, Lucinda leaned across the table. "You need to leave," she whispered. "He doesn't like visitors." "Come with me," Claire urged, "at least to get that gash dressed properly." Lucinda shook her head. "He'd find me." "Does he hurt you?" Lucinda's eyes filled with tears. "Only when I deserve it." Claire felt the familiar twist of fury. No one deserved it. The toilet flushed. Lucinda straightened, gathering the empty mugs with shaking hands, her eyes constantly flicking to the door as she headed for the sink. Claire slid her bag onto her lap, fingers closing around the small bottle she had carried for what seemed forever. She glanced at the beer glass left on the table. Before David's footsteps reached the kitchen, she tipped the bottle. The amber liquid barely rippled. She slipped the bottle back into her bag. David reappeared, adjusting his belt. "Still here?" "Just leaving," Claire said. "Good." He reached for his beer. "Thank you for the tea," she added, standing. "Come on, Luce," David muttered, lifting the glass. "Hurry up, we've got work to do." Claire rose. Lucinda followed her to the door. "Be careful on the roads," Lucinda said. "You take care too," Claire replied, "and get some antiseptic or something on that cut." Outside, the air was sharp with the smell of pine. She walked to the car without looking back, started the engine, and drove until the trees thinned and the highway appeared. Only then did she pull over, hands shaking. The choice she had made sat heavy inside her. She waited for the remorse, for the guilt, for the fear. None came. She thought of Lucinda's broken attitude, of her damaged face, of the man with the heavy ring, and of the beer glass that would, she hoped, now be empty on the table. And her hands no longer trembled. She pulled back onto the road and headed towards whatever it was she was becoming. She couldn't wait to tell Michelle. She imagined her friend's approving smile, the way she'd say, "That's my blood sister." Claire grinned and pulled out into the road again,